Have you ever wondered why your phone never gets unlocked with the wrong password? Like, how does it even know that you entered the wrong one? That's where conditional statements come in. I welcome you to the 5th episode of our Python beginner course, and today's video is about conditional statements. Let's get started. Now, let's try to understand what are conditional statements. Now, conditional statements are basically some statements that work on a given condition and lets the computer make decisions. Now, I will actually explain this with a real life scenario, right? Let's say that you wake up one day and you open your curtains, right? It's raining outside. So you have to get to work. Now, as it is, you cannot leave the house, right? You need an umbrella. So here, the condition here is rain because it's raining outside, right? And your decision is to take the umbrella, right? This is what we call a conditional statement. Now you can do this in Python as well. You can actually let the computer choose the decision according to the condition. So now let's move on to VS Code and I'll show an example. Now let's see how to write a conditional statement. So to write a conditional statement, you need 3 keywords. One is if. So it basically means if something is true, then execute that code. Another is elif, meaning else if. So if this is not true, run this. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I will explain in a bit when we actually write conditional statements, so don't worry. And the last keyword that you use to write conditional statements is else. So these 3 will be your foundation of writing conditional statements. So we also have a few operators that we often use in conditional statements that we call comparison operators. So these are double equals to. So this is used, you know how we use the equal to operator to assign a value to a variable. We use double equals to check if a is equal to 4. So let's say a is equals to 4 and we'll print a double equals to 4. So the difference between these two is basically here, the value 4 is getting assigned to a. But in this, basically it is checking if a is equal to 4. So if it is, it will return true. All of the comparison operators will return true or false. So they'll give the output in Boolean. So if I run this, as you can see, it will say true because a is in fact equal to 4. So the first one is double equals to, another is greater than. So as the operator suggests, it basically checks if any value is greater than another value. Now another is less than. It will check value is less than another value, and another is greater than equals to, and another is less than equal to. And the last comparison operator is not equal to. So let's say if we give a value 5, we assign the value 5 to a, and we check if a is not in fact equal to 4. So it's basically, is a equal to 4? If it's not, the exclamation mark, it basically resembles not in programming. So if it's checking if a is not equal to 4, in this case it's not because a equals to 5. So in this case it will return true. If a is equal to 4, so in this case it will return false because a is in fact equal to 4. I'll give you a quick example of every single one of these comparison operators. So let's say 3 is greater than 2. In this case, it will return true. Let me comment this part out. So if I run this, as you can see, it will say true because 3 is in fact greater than 2. We can do print 3 is less than 2. In this case, it will return false because 3 is not less than 2. As you can see, after that, we'll do 3 greater than equals to 2. In this case, it will return true because 3 is in fact greater than equal to 2. So if you put 3 here, it will in fact return true because 3 is greater and equals to 3. As you can see here. So after that, same goes for here. It will return false because 3 is not in fact less than equals to 2. So with that, we can finally start writing our conditional statements. So we'll make a small program that basically checks if the password entered by the user is in fact correct or not. So what we'll do is basically I will make a title saying password checker, I guess. So first, let me comment this part out. So first, we'll take the input from the user saying the password. We'll take input saying enter your password. We'll do that. So this is where the user will enter his password. After that, what we'll do is basically to check if password is correct. To do that, we use the if-else statement. What we'll do is basically say if password is equal to, as we know, this operator is used to check the values between the variable or the actual value. So in this case, let's say the correct password, which the password will be compared to, is let's say pass123. So it's saying if password is equal to pass123, then use a semicolon right after you end your if statement. So we're checking if password is correct to pass123, then print correct password. You can log in. So this will be a string that will get displayed after the user enters the right password. But what if the user enters the wrong password? To do that, we use else. If else gets rejected, that means password is not correct to pass123. This right here, you know, it returns a Boolean value, so it'll be false if user does not enter the right password. Then it will go to else. And if user is wrong, then we'll do invalid password. Let's check. So if we run the code, first I will give pass123, which is our correct password. It will say correct password, you can log in. So what happens here is basically first the user inputs the password, and after that the if statement will get executed saying the password, which is the variable. It will check if it is equal to pass123. If it is, this line of code will get executed. Now you might be thinking, what is this? Why is there a big space after the if statement? So this is what we call an indentation. So indentation is very important in Python, not only to make your code readable, it is also required syntax-wise. So if I remove this indentation and try to run the code, it will just say indentation error. So it basically means this print statement is inside this if statement. If password is not correct to pass123, this operation right here will return false. So fun fact, if statement will get executed if whatever operation or condition that is inside the if statement returns true. So overall, all the operations inside the if statement should return true in order for the code inside the if statement to get executed. If I completely change this to true, it will run. And let's say if I do whatever password we enter, it will still run the true statement because we have set the universal condition of the if statement as true. Now let's move on to understanding what is Elif statement. So To understand Elif statement, I will make a small program that basically kind of checks the weather. So what I'll do is basically, I'll just say checking weather as a topic. So first, I'll declare a variable saying temperature or temp. The initial value of the temperature will be 15. Just understand that outside is 15 degrees, right? I'll check if temp is greater than 30. So in case if temp is greater than 30, what I'll do is print it's hot. It's hot outside. So it's hot outside. And now I have said one condition in if statement saying temp is greater than 30. Now here I need to set another condition. What if temp is greater than 20, right? I can do that by using Elif temp is greater than 20. We do this because else does not allow any condition. Else is a condition that comes if none of the condition here gets satisfied. We'll do print. We'll do if it is greater than 20 degrees, we'll do it's warm. Elif, if temp is greater than 10, we'll do is basically print it's cold. So according to our program, it should return print is cold. But I will also include an else statement just in case if I change the value of temp, if none of the condition here gets satisfied, it will come to this else block. And we'll do it's very, very cold. So after that, I'll run the code and it should say it's cold. So you might be noticing a pattern that I have used the value of the temperature in descending order. We do that to prevent that when a value is taken, let's say if I take 15, but if I give like 10, 20, and 30, and now this is in ascending order, right? So if I take a value, let's say 45, now I will still print this value because after 45 is assigned to temp, it will come here. Since 45 is still greater than 10, it will directly print this value, not even checking all of its values. So how print statement work is if it finds the first ever condition true, it will just execute whatever code that is inside that if statement or elif statement, okay? It will completely ignore any other conditions. That's why we use in descending order. But there is another way of doing it. We can use logical operators. So logical operators are three types. One is AND or NOT. So these three are logical operators. Now, let me show you by giving an individual example of all three of these. Comment this part out and say, got this. So first, I'll show an example of AND. I'll do print. So AND is an operator that combines two comparison operations. So we'll do 4 is greater than 2 and 5 is greater than 3. So here we have two comparison operations. AND is kind of a logical operator that will only return true if both of these comparison operation will return true. If even one of these comparison operations return false, then whole operation will result to false. So here 4 is greater than 2, this will return true. 5 is greater than 3, this will also return true. So it should return true, and there you go. Let's say if I do 5 is greater than 6. Now here, as you know, this statement here is false. So if I try to run this, it will return false because even if 4 is in fact greater than 2, 5 is not greater than 6. So this will return to false. Now that's not the case for OR. So if I put OR here, so in OR, even if one of these comparison operation will return true, the whole operation will result to true. In this case, it will return true. And if both of these are false, this will result to false. As you can see, if I do 1 is greater than 2, as you can see, it will say false because both of these conditions are false. So for not, basically what we'll do is basically, let's say if I do, let's say print 2 is greater than 3. As you know, this is false. But if I do not, if I put a not in front of it, it will just basically invert the value saying it's true. So not basically acts as an inverter. So if it's true, it will make it false. If it's false, it will make it true. So now that we know what our logical operator, let's try to implement in this code. Let's uncomment this and I'll cut this. So previously we had to use in descending order like this, right? In order for the code to function. Now what we can do is basically put temp if temp is greater than 10 and temp is less than 20. I'll do temp is less than or equals to 20. So basically check if temp is greater than 10 and temp is less than 20. So it basically checks if the value of temp lies between 10 and 20. We'll do 20 and we'll do and temp is less than equals to 30. We'll do the same here if the value is greater than 30. If the value is greater than 30, then it will basically say it's cold. So let's try. It's cold, as you can see. It works. It did not go to any of these if and elif statements. Now, the final topic for conditional statements will be the nested if statements. So let me comment this and come down and put a heading saying nested if nested conditional statements. Conditional statements. So what are nested conditional statements? So now up until now we have used if, elif, and else, right? Now nested conditional statements, or we can say nested if statements, basically mean if statement inside another if statement. We can understand it by a small program, small and simple program, that is user login. So we'll basically build a simple user login program. So first we'll have to take email of the user. We'll take the email of the user saying input, enter your email. We'll ask the user for their email and password, saying input, enter your password. Okay, so we'll make correct email. We'll make another variable that will store the actual correct email. So let's suppose the correct email is codin@gmail.com and the correct password is, let's say, pass123 again. So this is our correct email and password. Okay, so now what we'll do is basically use the if statement to check the email and correct email and password to correct password. What we'll do is basically if email double equal, so that is if email is equal to correct email. Now we have checked email, right? We also have to check the password. Now what we'll do is basically inside this if statement, we'll make another if statement saying if password is equal to correct password. So first, what we did is basically check the email and check the password. Okay. So if email and password both are right, we will say login successful. Okay. But what if password is not correct? Let's say the user entered the right email and accidentally inputted the wrong password. So what we'll do is in the indentation of this if statement, which is the inner if statement of email, we'll do else print password incorrect. So what we'll do is basically if email is correct, so it will go inside this if statement because the user entered the right password and this will return true. This if statement will get executed. After that, it will check if password is correct. If it isn't, it will not go to this block of code and will basically run this else statement, which will say password incorrect. Now we'll put else here in the indentation of the email. What if user entered the wrong email at the beginning? We'll basically say email is wrong. Okay. Or we'll say, we'll say incorrect email. So let me summarize the code again. We made the user enter their email and password. We declared another two variables saying correct email and correct password that store the correct email and correct password. We checked that email is in fact correct with email by using if statement. Now, if email is not correct, it will directly show that, and it should show incorrect email. If the user entered the right email, this block of code, which is inside the if statement, will get executed. But since it's nested conditional statement, we have another if statement that is checking if password is correct. So if the password is correct, it'll basically just say login successful. But if password is incorrect, as you know, this if statement has indented with this else statement, it will show password incorrect. This is the whole logic behind the code. Let's test it. First, we'll put the right credentials, saying codin@gmail.com, and the password is pass123. As you see, it says login successful. But let's say I entered the wrong password and the right email. So I'll do codin@gmail.com, but I'll do pass1234. As you can see, it says password incorrect because since we entered the right email here, it got executed, and this if statement got rejected because we entered the wrong password. So this was for today, guys. I hope you liked the video. If you did, hit the like button and actually subscribe to the channel. And with that said, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.